In the grand halls of imperial Rome, power once glimmered like polished marble. But beneath that sheen lay shadows so deep that even history struggles to illuminate them. Few rulers embodied those shadows more completely than Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, the man the world would come to know as Caligula. To the Romans of his time, Caligula began not as a tyrant, but as a symbol of hope. He was the adored son of the heroic general Germanicus, the child who wore tiny soldier boots while marching beside his father, a detail that earned him the affectionate nickname Caligula, meaning little boots, when he rose to the throne in 37 AD. After years of political fear under Emperor Tiberius, the Roman world erupted in celebration. The Senate, the army, and the people saw him as a savior. Caligula's first months as emperor seemed to confirm the prophecy of greatness. He reduced taxes, released prisoners, restored public games, and poured wealth into rebuilding projects that breathed life back into Rome's weary streets. For the first time in years, laughter returned to the city. To the crowds, it felt as though the gods themselves had granted them a benevolent ruler, young, brilliant, generous, and full of charm. But history teaches that the most radiant dawns can hide the darkest storms. Within the first year of his reign, Caligula fell gravely ill. Ancient accounts describe a fever so intense that Rome feared its emperor would not survive. Citizens prayed, temples overflowed with offerings, and the city waited in suspense. Then, against all odds, Caligula recovered. Yet the man who emerged from that sickness was no longer the same. Something inside him had shifted, not merely his health, but his mind, his perception of power, and his relationship with the divine. He began to believe that he was more than human. In his eyes, he had crossed the boundary between man and God. The transformation revealed itself, gradually, but unmistakably. He ordered that the heads of all statues of gods across Rome be replaced with his own likeness. He spoke of himself as Jupiter reborn, the living embodiment of the divine will. What had once been charisma became obsession. What had been confidence evolved into absolute self-worship. Caligula's reign turned from celebration to control. The palace that once echoed with music and laughter became a labyrinth of whispers and fear. Every senator, every officer, every servant knew that the emperor's favor could vanish with a glance. To survive meant to obey, and obedience soon became Rome's most valuable currency. The historian Suetonius later wrote that Caligula ruled as if the entire empire existed to mirror his moods. Rewards and punishments no longer followed logic, they followed emotion. He rewarded loyalty with gold one day and condemned the same loyal subject the next. The Senate, once proud and powerful, was reduced to a chorus of trembling voices, echoing whatever pleased him. Caligula's control over Rome was not merely political, it was psychological. He understood that true dominance required more than armies. It required submission of the spirit. Fear became his greatest weapon. Citizens never knew when an offhand joke, an uncertain bow, or a misplaced compliment could cost them everything. Rome's upper class, once the guardians of tradition and honor, became paralyzed by terror and silence. His nights grew restless. Ancient writers describe him wandering the palace corridors under torchlight, speaking to statues, questioning the moon, and pacing for hours without sleep. Whether these stories were exaggerated or not, they reveal how his rule became a performance of divine madness, a theater of absolute power. The emperor, who once inspired love, had become a man driven by the need to prove that no one and nothing could limit him. The deeper tragedy of Caligula's rule was not simply his cruelty, but his precision. His power was not chaotic. It was structured, recorded, and bureaucratic. Every decision, every punishment, every display of control was noted by clerks and scribes. Rome had turned its fear into paperwork. The empire that once prided itself on law and order had built an administrative system to manage obedience. In that sense, Caligula did not destroy Rome's institutions. He weaponized them. The emperor's authority became self-feeding. Each act of fear strengthened the machinery that maintained it. Those who participated in his commands often did so not from loyalty, but from self-preservation. Soldiers enforced orders because to question them was death. Senators complied because silence was the last refuge of safety. Gradually, Rome became complicit in its own oppression. This is perhaps the most chilling legacy of Caligula, the way he taught an entire civilization how easily morality could bend when power demanded it. He did not need constant violence to rule. He needed only the promise of it, the knowledge that he could destroy lives with a word. Under that shadow, people learned to censor their thoughts before they spoke, to nod before they reasoned, to applaud before they understood. By 41 AD, even those who once served closest to him had begun to break. The Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers sworn to protect the emperor, had grown weary of his humiliation and erratic decrees. Among them was Cassius Chaerea, a veteran who had endured years of mockery from Caligula. What began as personal resentment soon became political revolt. On a cold January day, as Caligula walked through an underground passage beneath his palace toward the theater, the conspirators struck. He fell under a flurry of blades, the same guards who had once shielded him now ending his life. The emperor, who believed himself immortal, died as mortals do, swiftly and without grandeur. In the aftermath, Rome erupted in confusion. Some cheered, others panicked. The Senate debated restoring the Republic, while the soldiers moved to secure a new emperor. Caligula's wife and child perished soon after, and the dynasty he represented was erased. His memory was declared cursed, damnatio memoriae, and his name was struck from monuments and coins. But erasing his image could not erase the damage. The fear he had cultivated, the obedience he had normalized, and the bureaucratic cruelty he had perfected outlived him. The empire moved on, but it had learned a dark lesson that once power becomes more important than principle, tyranny no longer needs a tyrant. Caligula's story endures because it asks an uncomfortable question. How does civilization collapse from within? The answer lies not in conquest or invasion, but in the quiet surrender of conscience. When leaders demand worship instead of accountability, when institutions trade justice for convenience, when people choose silence over truth, the result is the same. The machinery of fear begins to turn, and everyone becomes a part of it. In the end, Caligula was not merely a madman on a throne. He was a mirror, reflecting what happens when unchecked authority meets human ambition. His reign reminds us that history's greatest empires often fall, not because but because they forget what they were meant to protect. 2,000 years later, his marble palaces are ruins, and his name is a warning whispered through time. Power, left unrestrained, always finds a way to turn itself into fear. And when a ruler begins to believe he is divine, it is humanity that suffers. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and cautionary as we did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of history. Let us know in the comments what historical figure you'd like us to explore next. Until then, stay curious.